So to be in this place and have workshops like this and understandings like this is to just let go of the pre-programming and the filtering that this may be received through. And obviously, you guys are here, so you are open to that. However, it's just about like allowing it in, and this is part of the reason that I wanted to do this soul codes is to demystify it a little bit. Like last week with light language, the whole idea of light language, when we break it down scientifically from the fact that we are light and vibration, and that's basically what we're talking about. And so it's the language of energy, it's the language of light, and how we perceive and communicate through language or through light. So the other thing that I wanted to do, and that's what today's about, is there's also a lot of talk around the Akashic records. Now, have you guys all heard of the Akashic records?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
You haven't heard the term, or have you heard the term before, or not really?
Not from memory.
Okay. A newbie. That's all good. What about you, Belinda?
Yeah, kind of. I shared with you on a message about reading it in the Sophia codes, and I guess I'm like really interested because I'm like, man, I really want to know like whom, and I kind of interpreted it a bit differently because when I was doing the Oliver Nino's thing and he was talking about it, I thought that the way he explained it was that you've got like the the big, I'm going to say deity, but it's not the right word, but you know what I mean, like these like the Christ. So there's Jesus and there's Mother Mary and there's the big ones, you know what I'm talking about, right?
All the big kahunas.
The big ones that you can in the spiritual realm tap into. Apparently this is all new for me. So I thought that Akashic Records was like we all have access to different ones of those. But then the Sophia Code book was, I'm only just starting to read that, was that no, the Akashic Records are your access to your lifetime. So then that doesn't make sense with what I just said before. So there we go. That's where I'm up with it.
It's great. It's great. And it can be confusing. And also, what I find interesting about the conversation we're going to have today is that one of the big things that I think is more and more important, just like what we've just been talking about life changing and how things like numerology and all the things are becoming more mainstream. And so through that, more and more people are what I am seeing, especially with the online environment, um, almost branding themselves a bit, with like, I am an Akashic guide, or I'm a light language teacher, or, I have gifts in this and this and this ability. And so because there is this transition time when there is more and more of the mainstream of muggles coming into the awareness of like, hey, actually, I do know that I am into this stuff and I'm curious, and it is becoming more available to us. So the thing that I really think is important is if we have a little bit more of an understanding, if we do a little bit of a exploration about what this actually means, then you can be a bit more discerning as well as to who and what you engaged with, and then have your own feeling and opinion and intuition and filter of awareness, so that, because it can be, there's lots of charlatans out there as well, potentially, as there is, as we know. So, and there's also lots of really amazing people, but we need some discerning to go, does this resonate with my belief system? And the same goes for what I'm going to share with you today. Does this resonate with you? So, like I always say, hold it lightly and use your discernment. And I'm just sharing with you what my research and what my study and my knowing and awareness has uncovered, and what I believe to be true. So that's where we're starting from. So one thing is that the first thing that I'll just say before we get into the presentation side of things is that the word Akashic and Akash is a Sanskrit word. and the Sanskrit word means space. And so when we know in yoga and meditations, we talk about the Chittakash. Have you heard that term, the Chittakash? And that's like when we get into meditation, we close our eyes and we look into the inside of our head. And the chitta is the mind. Chittakash is the mind space. So we also have the term Hridayakash. And the word Hridaya is the heart space. Hridayakash is the heart space. And then we have the term Dharanakash, and that's the Dharana, which is the Dan Chan in Tai Chi, which is like the sort of pelvic lower body. So you have the Dharanakash, which is the lower body, the Hridayakash, which is the heart space, and the Chittakash, which is the mind space. So these are spaces, energy spaces within us. And then we have the Mahakash, and the Maha, the word Maha means great. So the Mahakash is the great space, okay? So in yoga and in meditation practices of energy, we channel in, or we tap into the spaces. And Akash is the word space. So when we start to go with the Akashic records, we're talking about the space, okay? And that's where we can sometimes get the concept of there is a space, and they call it sometimes the cosmic library. So there is this the concept sometimes of there is this space somewhere in the infinite everythingness that is the library of everything, of all that has always been. And that is often how the Akashic records is presented, that there is this space, and through either a medium, either a person who's tapped in, or through a practice that we learn ourselves, we can access this particular space somewhere in the universe. There is this space. So we're kind of going to look at that through that concept, and we're also going to work a little bit into that experience. However, we're also going to expand from that concept because personally, to me, there is more than that. So let's just have a little look at my ever-inspiring presentation. They look good, don't they?
They do look good.
So good. So impressed. So basically the idea is exploring the Akashic records as a journey through the universal consciousness. So this is where we start to look. There's the stairway to the Akashic records. We can go in there and go to the Akashic library. So again, like I said, the word Akasha is from Sanskrit, and it's also for the word ether and space. So we've talked about ether before as well, you know, and in our training, we've talked about the different elements, and ether is the space, it's the expansiveness. And so there are really lots of deep dives you can do, and it's very much, it starts to get into our mystical teachings. And when you do follow some of these amazing mystical teachers, they have the exploration of these concepts, and in Buddhism and in Hindu and lots of other things. Is also in the we'll talk about that in a sec, in the Aboriginals, the American Indian, shamanic practices, all of that sort of stuff. So we're actually talking about the same thing. But what's often used with the terminology of the Akashic records is that there is this library or a database that contains all knowledge. And it contains all knowledge and experiences and potential futures of every soul. So past, present, future, all of every soul. So this relates a little bit of what you were saying, Belinda, about an individual library or an individual concept. So that can relate a little bit, which is what we'll talk about a bit more next time, which is that whole sort of oversoul concept And that's all builds on each other. Okay. So it all builds on the different thing. But yes, there is an access to an individual's records, if you want to call it that. However, it's more than that as well. It's also this infinite field. So the Akashic records are said to exist in a higher plane of consciousness, like fifth dimension and beyond, and it's outside of linear time, which makes sense, of course, because if it was in linear time, then it's almost like a book that's being written, and then we can go and read the past and read it up to this point, but it's beyond linear time, so it's infinite. Um, Again, it's often referred to as this crystal grid. And when we get into this sort of idea of galactic codes and galactic consciousness and galactic realms, we'll delve into that a little bit more next time. I'm going to nudge you there gently, is this whole concept that to really break yourself out of, and again, this can be overwhelming for people, but I think the timing is right. I'm actually thinking I'll put a post up soon saying how are you doing? Are you ready for the aliens to come? How will your nervous system respond? Because there's all like happening now. There's so much talk about it. And it's more about the idea of letting go of the construct of what we think we know, because it's so much more as we're starting to discover. And so this is a great way to kind of start to explore that a little bit, like, oh, hey, what if there is? And this is what I always like, is just approach it with the what if. What if there was this? What if there was that? What would it look like? What would the experience be? So what would a crystal grid? What would a matrix? What would a concept of galactic grid or more, or what's happening outside of those things and how can we access it? So the idea of why do we care about Akashic records? Why do we even care? Well, there's a lot of it is around, self-discovery, because if there is like this individual awareness of a record, if you imagine a manila folder out there somewhere, which is all about your life and your soul journey up till now and whatever else is coming. So there's a lot of self-discovery opportunity for that, past life journeys and the purpose of this particular lifetime. So there's also an opportunity for healing by tapping into the Akashic records. We have access to what it is that, like, why are there these past traumas? What are some of the patterns that are influencing my life now? And I've shared this before. It may not be like we look at this particular current lifetime, and we often do reflect on the story of our life, my parents and this place where I grew up and that experience that happened with that person. And the story or the awareness, the healing is beyond that. It's so much bigger than that, because the reason you had that experience with those parents or that person or that in this lifetime, why this happened with that person and why those parents were like that, was because your soul chose the experience. There was something there for your soul to grow from. And so when we have access to the Akashic records in that way, we can find out what the purpose of it was. What was the lesson I was looking for? What was the insight? What was my soul's mission for that experience? And we can then also access, obviously, for some guidance to get some clarity. And this is, again, always coming back to soul alignment. We can get some clarity on, like, where to next. What is this, we've all been there. And this is the great thing about age and life experience, is that you can start to look back and maybe see certain patterns. So you might have a friendship, you might have a relationship, you might have a work situation, anything else, and you might a health issue, and you might see that it came into your life and you had a certain response to it, and then you feel like you've overcome it, and then all of a sudden it might be a different person but the same situation, or it might be you're in a different environment but the thing comes around again, and you see these cycles that we have in life, like the lesson needs to be learned. So when we have this idea of the connection to the Akashic records, it's that soul knowing, it's the soul contract that we can connect to. And then we can have clarity on, why is this here? What is my lesson? What is my opportunity here? And that is all about offering personal growth. So that's one really powerful reason why we even bother to, why do we care about the Akashic records? And then we're going to look a little bit at like what is the method of accessing this. So again, we come back to a lot of these things, like we're constantly talking about prayer and meditation and visualization and working with guides and teachers and all that sort of stuff. And we don't always say it's for Akashic records, and sometimes it's not that. But it is about connecting to soul and having soul guidance, and that's what we can refer to with the Akashic records as well. And frequency and vibration. Again, once again, it's resonance. So we can use our light language, we can use our intention setting, we can use breath work and sound healing, all those things that help us to expand our frequency. It's all about creating a higher vibrational set point of ourselves.
But can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
Is it just kind of a concept for what we do anyway?
Well, yeah. And I mean, this is the thing. And this is again why I think it's important to share these things, because sometimes when you hear the terminology of Akashic records and things like that, it sounds like something completely randomly different. However, when we start to demystify things, we're like, oh, okay, well, it's just another word for this, or it's another terminology for that. And so we can use that terminology, we can refer to it as the Akashic records. And as you'll see when we go on to the next presentation, we get a different perspective of it. But what we're doing at the moment is I'm kind of presenting it to you in a way that it is often presented, so that you can see that when it is presented in this way, it's not something different. It's like you can understand that, oh, okay, rather than this mystery of the Akashic records, it's like, oh, I know what you're talking about, and that's another way to understand it. Does that make sense a little the way?
Yeah.
And again, it is. It's not, it isn't different. It is just understanding that that's what we're talking about when we talk about the Akashic records. So what is the experience that people have when we're talking about, like, okay, how do you know that you've experienced a connection to the Akashic records? And you can get symbols and images and feelings and sensations and having direct insights, downloads. People talk about downloads all the time, auditory messages or emotional insights, basically channeling. And I've talked about that before, like even last time with light language, it's channeling. We're channeling. But when we talk about channeling, again, that can also be a story, because we look at people who are channeling again as gifted ones. Like maybe they have been gifted with something, they have a superpower. Whereas we all channel all the time. We're channeling all the time, but it just looks different in different ways. Like we are downloading and receiving inspiration. We are channeling inspiration. We are connecting into our soul, and that infinite multidimensional self. That's what that is. And we'll talk some more about the multidimensional self next time, to get a better understanding of what that all means. But like I said, it's all about demystifying all of these terminologies. It's all how we live. It's just having a clearer understanding of who we are and what we have access to. So after this presentation, we'll do a little bit more clarifying. So basically what I'm talking about is, like I just said, multidimensional nature, soul blueprint. I talk about the soul blueprint a lot. And that's basically also what the galactic codes is about. When we start to talk about galactic codes, understanding coding. I love this image here. It's like a spider web in there, but you can also look at it as a grid, right? And all of these highlighted bits are like nodes of code, right? And we can recalibrate and read some of those nodes to have a clearer understanding of what that grid is portraying. So if we understand, like, say, a holographic image, in order for a hologram to manifest in the desired image we want, like let's just talk literally about a hologram, like if there is a hologram, there has to be coding in the program to know what it needs to project. Okay, so there are there's been holograms and there is holograms around, and we're more and more using holograms to I think it was even, wasn't there a Tupac concert, and they had a holographic Tupac presenting the concert. So in order for that Tupac to be a hologram, there has to be coding in order for that to manifest in this way. You have to get the coding right. So if you imagine all of this is like coding to say that's the color is here and that's how he's going to move and this is the thing. So if we understand and read the code, then we have a clearer idea about the program that's running. And this is like what soul blueprint understanding is like as well, is to understand like what is the blueprint that I'm working with. And that's where we start to connect into Akashic records, understanding multidimensional, our own multidimensional self, and the interconnectedness of our lifetimes, which we'll talk about a little bit more. And we did talk about that in our training. And I did a meditation on we affirmations as opposed to I affirmations, from the concept of aligning with all versions of self. Yeah, and then obviously the whole concept of all of that is to have tap into spiritual exploration. So offering a way to tap into vast wisdom of the soul as opposed to the limited awareness of our temporary human life experience. And it's not like I have to. There's nothing wrong with just being, or like having this life experience as the knowing and fully embracing being Hamish, being Joe, being Belinda, being Wendy. Like there's no one thing that I think is really important to understand, especially on a spiritual quest, and is there is more and more and more and more awakening happening, that in order to maintain groundedness and realization is the fact that you are no more or less spiritual, because you are this infinite soul having a temporary life experience. And whether you are completely aware and conscious and living from that expanded self or not, I mean, if you can live from the vast wisdom of the soul, like what a fun journey it is. But if you don't live from that, doesn't mean you haven't got the vast wisdom of the soul. You are just choosing to be more focused in the density of the human. But that doesn't mean you're not that. And I think that's super important. Like I even feel goosebumps and feel like crying saying it, is that with every single person that you ever meet, don't underestimate the vastness of their soul. It doesn't matter who they are, and it doesn't matter how they are expressing, because every single person is this infinite soul with this connection. And it's just a matter of whether they choose to or not. And sometimes they're not aware because we're all unconscious down here. And it's just a matter of whether we choose to be more conscious. But some people are choosing on some level to either not wake up in this time, and it'll serve their soul in some way. And some people are going to be waking up big time now, and that's where we need discernment, because a lot of people are going to wake up. You know how it is when you learn a little bit of information, you feel like a big fish in a little pond, and you tell everybody about how amazing you are and everything you know. And then as you learn more and more, you realize you don't know anything. And so it's the ones that are telling you they know everything to be wary of, because that's like, yeah. And yeah, just humility is what I'm saying. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's the point that the scientific validation of the concept of the Akashic records is not quite there. So what we said right in the beginning of this presentation is that what in the 80s was completely not scientific is now scientific. And so the same thing is with Akashic, the terminology of Akashic records. However, as we'll look in a minute, there is scientific confirmation of what we're talking about here. So, How has that landed so far? It's a lot. So, what is quite helpful is, Hamish, can you kind of give me a couple of concepts of what you think I just said?
That you've been talking about so far?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that sounds kind of similar to something that I suppose you could say I was experiencing at the start of the year. I'd kind of talk through it with Joe, just through doing my breath work and things like that. Mainly, like I said last week, all of my stuff is typically visual and quite detailed. So yeah, I've still got notes and stuff from what I wrote down from doing that. I just kind of found it quite exhausting. And yeah, it's just kind of all this, I suppose, information's kind of coming in, and yeah, because well, partially to what you're saying, I quite often claim that I know nothing. And it's just like, yeah, not not really knowing kind of the point or what to do with any of it type thing. So whether to disregard it or yeah, I don't know how useful or what the point of it is.
It's great. It's awesome. Yeah. It's for me, I'm just like, oh, that's exciting. No, it's useful and there is a point to it all. So that's really awesome. And it's just, yeah, we're just lifting the veil. And it's like what I was just saying before, every single person we meet is this infinite being in
Yeah.
front of you. And so that's just like you had an opportunity to fully see that to that degree. It's like people who go and do a crazy trip or mushrooms or ayahuasca on a bigger scale. They all of a sudden have a completely different insight into all of reality. And like you say, what do you do with that? Okay, that's great. Now I know that. Nice. Now what?
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's yeah, a good reflection on how this may land. What about you, Belinda? It's like from that little bit of what I just shared just now, what sort of landed for you on that, or what is the understanding of it? You're muted.
So you're saying that how do you know that it's that? How do
That
you know things are coming through are that
that being what?
records? How do you know?
Well, we'll go into that a little bit more.
Am I
So-
jumping ahead?
No, so from what I was just hearing from the way that I kind of presented that in that way, what does that, how do you experience that? Like, what does that look like to you right now?
I guess in my head, I kind of like imagine it to be that you're going to get information through that that just feels like it's not you, it feels a little more because it feels like it's coming from another, yeah, a different person or a different version of you, yeah. And maybe not in this in more depth in this particular time frame of time,
Mhm.
So I'm assuming, because I don't know, that you would. I guess, yeah, I've had like little things happen where you're like that, yeah, like being. So I guess that's glimpses of it, right?
Mm. Mm. Yeah, and it
But
is
how do you
about
know that the identity of that when it comes through?
that's a good
And
point.
then you're channeling.
It's a good point to understand, and identity is a good word because what is identity, which we'll explore a bit more. What about you, Joe? What kind of, from that concept just now, what kind of were some ways that you would understand that, what we just talked about?
Well, it's like I kind of brought up before. I'm like it's a concept for everything that we kind of do when to me, it's like when I'm meditating, when I'm doing breath work, when I'm, visualizing all of that. The Akashic records sound like a concept, a name of what we're tapping into and what we're experiencing when we are practicing spiritual practices and deepening our understanding and going within. That's kind of what we're tapping into. So to me, it was kind of like, so that's a word for all of that.
And from the perspective of the word Akasha, like when we come back into a space, and from that, see, this is the part that I think is really great for us to grasp, is because of our human conditioning programming, is that we understand things as in form, and we understand things as within time. And so when we can't have the concept of a record, then it would be like recorded and suspended in space. And if we also have the concept of a Akashic library, like there is a space somewhere in the fabric of the universe that we can open the door and pull a file out kind of concept. So there is a more expansive way to experience how we could perceive the Akashic records. So let's have another little look at another, like as we sort of expand that some more. So this is where we start to get more into quantum physics. Okay. So the idea that the meaning and the science kind of, or the ancient wisdom and the science kind of converging a little bit more, which is, my buzz. So the quantum field theory is this whole unified field. It's the field of all potential, right? So quantum physics, the unified field, is this infinite field of like everything, and everything arises within that space. So in our training, we also talked about Shiva and Shakti and the consciousness and the infinite all, and the Purusha and Prakriti and all the things from the infinite potential. So the concept of like there is this field that holds all infinite potential, all information. And what I also like is to play around with the word information. So when we have a concept, or we have knowledge, or we have a frequency that is channeled into and received as a knowing, that then allows that to become in form, to become form, to become material. So it's this infinite field that can become formation, material. So the idea is the fabric of all creation is beyond a place, and this is where we move. We open our concept of an akash, of a space. And this is where, like when we talk, what I was mentioning before, the Hriday Akash, the heart space, it's not limited to just the chest cavity, but it is a frequency vortex, that is a space, that is considered to be a frequency vortex within time and space, just like my body is an energy vortex within time and space. So there is a tangible form, but in reality, when we break it down to quantum physics, it's not, is it? It's like part of the field. Everything here is part of a field. When we think about the Matrix, the movie The Matrix, it's all ones and zeros, right? So it is all just a coding. And when we start to look at the fabric of all creation, it's like beyond a place. So the Akashic record is like as the fabric of all creation itself. It's less of a place and more of a frequency and vibration, more of a state of being. And it's really the main thing that I want to kind of share, is because it is often referred to as a library, and it's almost like it's often marketed, if you will, as a library that certain people have the code to get into. And so it's like, I can read your Akashic records. So you come to me so I can read your Akashic records, and I'll go in there and then I'll get some information and I'll bring it back to you. It's kind of that sort of understanding a lot of the time around the Akashic records. Even for yourself, for the concept of like, where is my Akashic records, so that I can go in and get the code to the door and go into the Akashic library and get the information. Whereas when we think of it more as frequency and vibration, which is what we're talking about here and what we talked about last week as well, is like understanding that there is a frequency alignment. Just like when we do a meditation and we focus on the Hridayakash, the heart space, and we focus on the torus field of the heart, or we come into heart coherence, we meditate, we bring our awareness, our consciousness, our energy to that space, and we feel an activation of the heart space. We feel an activation because we have aligned with the frequency of it. And as we align to the frequency of it, we are more of it. And the same thing is that when we align to the frequency of the Akashic record, or the infinite self, or the field of all creation, we have access to infinite knowledge. That's the power of understanding the Akashic records. That was quite good, really. That landed for me anyway. So again, I've talked before about Paul Selig and Matthias De Stefano, not to you guys, but in our training. And, you know, the idea of a collective consciousness. So yes, there is an alignment and a frequency with your soul blueprint that is part of the field of all creation. And there is a collective consciousness, right? There is this collective. There is also, you know, there's your soul blueprint, and then there's your oversoul understanding. And then there is obviously also the infinite field of every soul's awareness. And so all of that is all that is. And that really does, you know, transcend a state of eternal now. It operates as an eternal now. It's not just light little, you know, little concept we're talking about, but so again, once we're talking about how do you access the Akashic records, and it's about like tuning in, again, meditation, energy activations, breath work, as you experienced, Hamish, and, you know, deep states of intuition. So like we say, it doesn't always have to be something you consciously do. Sometimes it just lands. You know, sometimes you just manage to get out of the way, and you just manage to receive that connection, that download, like you were saying, Belinda, when you sometimes get those downloads and you don't know where it's coming from. It's you access that information, which is cool. And that multidimensional self and expanding awareness, like what I was saying, is that, you know, once we have that awareness of our multidimensional self, that we can align. I mentioned it in our training that in Mindvalley, they have a program called Quantum Jumping. And it's a really fascinating story of this guy who was able to access his multidimensional self, all his versions of himself. And he later in life learned to do that. And so he would just channel the version of himself that happened to be an amazing photographer. And so he would just get out of the way. Next minute, he could take amazing photography, and he just like had a gallery of photography work and sells his photography work. He also became a painter. He also started to play the piano, never ever been taught, never anything else. He just tapped into the version of himself that can play the piano. So there's all these different things where we have versions of ourselves right now. We can tap into a version of ourselves who is destitute on the street, and we can tap into the version of ourselves who's multi-millionaire living in a mansion. It's about like getting the codes from what it is that we have already received, that we already are. When we get inspired for something, it's because it already exists in the reality. When we have a desire for something, it already exists.
And
So
when you say getting the codes, do you kind of mean getting to the being in the state, the frequency, the vibration of that?
yeah, so and we'll do a little practice of this in a minute, but we are so much more than this, because if we understand truly, truly, truly that this physical density, this brain and this nervous system and the heart and the blood and everything else is not the limitation to who and what we are. There, it is the vessel, and we honor it, and it is a phenomenal experience to have. And as we know, there is so much more, because when we truly expand our energy and our frequency, we can, first of all, receive thought patterns and things like that. Sometimes when you're really open, we've talked about that as an HSP, it can be really overwhelming to be in certain environments because we're picking up, we're perceiving thoughts and frequencies from, like, say, if you're in a mall, it's this data overload, and when you're in a relationship and you are resonating with each other, you almost merge a little bit, and there is this third language, so there is this like knowing, and we do it with our animals. Like the communication level I have with my dogs is phenomenal, and particularly Reg and I, like I'm literally having conversations with him, and it's completely a two-way conversation, completely. So when we then have like, okay, that means that I'm having a multi-dimensional experience where I am experiencing the awareness of the frequency of the nature of my dog, and I can have a multidimensional awareness where I can experience the frequency of the nature of my partner. So that is all within this realm. But if we then also understand that we can have an experience like we've all had that in our dreams, where we are beyond form in our dreams and we get visited by a loved one, and we call it being visited by a loved one, but what we're doing is we're tapping into the consciousness of them. So we are in that experience able to transcend time and space in the infinite field and connect to the consciousness of them. And we can do that in this state. We don't have to be dreaming. We can do that at any time. And sometimes when we've had a loved one pass, we can feel the presence of them. We can feel that connection and have that communication. So why not with ourselves? Why not connect with the version of self that can play the piano or whatever else, So that is kind of receiving the coding, because remember we looked at that image of the potential hologram and all the nodes that are there. That's the information. So the information is in the field. And so as a consciousness, if I tap into the information of the version of myself. So if you imagine in the field of all potential, I'll just do this for a sec. I knew I had the right people on here. Sorry if it's all too much. But if you imagine that in the field of all potential, right, because this is quantum physics. So I've shared this before too, and you were on the retreat, Belinda, so you got this last time when we were on the other retreat, is if I'm wearing a computer simulation headset, right, and I'm in the computer simulated game, that game is the field of all potential, and there is programming and coding within that game. So if I'm looking this way, then the coding tells that if I'm looking that way, there is coding to say that there is a red car there, right? That's the coding, but it's only renders into visualization or visual once I'm viewing it in that direction. But when I look away from it, the red car is not there, but the potential for the red car is still there because it's in the coding. It's in the field of the simulation. Does that make sense? So when I'm not here, it's not rendering into reality. But when I look at it, because the coding says that, now I'm rendering the red car. So the field of infinite potential, say I've got 10 versions of me, and one of them has got the coding of the red car, and one of them is coded to be, wealthy, and one's coded to be this, and one's coded to that. When I tap into the coding of that version, I can receive the code, the download in this time, and I can potentially render this version of me. So, like that guy, he taps into and he's channeling and receiving the codes on how to play the piano because that version of him has the code. And that version of that one has the code on how to be a good photographer. And that version has the code on how to be a painter, so we can receive coding. And, I'm sure the only limitation we have is our current level of belief system. It's pretty out there today.
No, it all makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I think it does. I don't know. Does it make perfect sense to you, Hamish?
Yeah, well, like I said, it sounds similar to what I'd kind of been experiencing earlier. I just had no idea what it was.
Well, you better start practicing the piano. Just who knows what coding you might have received. You're just sitting there now with these codes just in your pocket waiting to be utilized. Yeah, and so basically it's that the Akashic records, when I like, so in most of my teachings I come back to yoga and the ancients teachings of yoga, because when you look at Ayurveda, when you look at yoga, if you fully look at the yoga philosophies, it's a lifetime, many lifetimes worth of knowledge that is it's so phenomenal. The yogic teachings, the bigger yoga teachings, not just the postures, but even the postures, the way that the how ancient yoga is, the tradition of yoga, it wasn't something that they scientifically researched. It wasn't like how we now like go to the gym and we look at anatomy and then we look at, okay, so if I want to train a bicep, what would be a good exercise? Well, a bicep works like this, and that exercise would train that. And that's how we developed a training program. In yoga, it literally was a download. It was a channeled download. There was the postures, the teachings, the philosophies, everything is so vast and so stands true. And now that we understand things in a scientific way, you can't fault it. It's phenomenal. So where did that knowledge come from? And it comes from the quantum field. It doesn't come from the mind. It wasn't the mind that came up with the concept. So, like we were just saying, it's one field, but it has many names. So it brings us back to the concept that, okay, we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about the same thing here that we hear. Does that kind of land a little? Yes. Yep. Good. Okay. I know it's all, I love it, and I could go down these rabbit holes a million times, but I know sometimes it's a little bit late. But you're still with me, so that's good. Okay. So last little bit, and then we're going to do a little practice on that, little experience of what is that? Because I wanted to bring it back to the concept of light language. Is this the one? I think so. Looks like I've seen that picture before. Yeah, no, this is it. So again, like I said, the Akashic records is in all the ancient traditions. So Hindu and Vedic philosophies, like I was just talking about, like things like the nadis and the chakras and light language and Akashic fields. Buddhism talks about non-linear time and higher states of consciousness. Indigenous and shamanic practices. So when we talk, the Aborigines talk about the dreaming, and the dreaming is actually the Akashic records as well. It's beyond. It's like going into the dreaming to receive information. And the shamanic traditions and the American Indian traditions is like you go into these shamanic practices where you go into other fields of consciousness, other awareness. And there's all these practices like obviously ayahuasca, but there's also practices where the shaman will facilitate you into a realm, a realm of consciousness to go in and retrieve the knowledge that you need for your journey. And in shamanic practices, I love shamanic practices, and I do a lot of work with it myself, is literally you have, spirit guides and you have spirit animals and you have all these the support crew so that when you go into these other realms, and this is like what ayahuasca's like, not that I've done it, but the whole point is that it's so discombobulating because it really, really, really like dissolves the human experience. And if your psyche can't handle that, it's very, very, even in yoga with people having Kundalini awakening, if their psyche is not prepared for it, they definitely can have a psychotic episode and experience, and people take it sometimes can't come back from it or take a long time to integrate that experience because it's such a overwhelmingly discombobulating experience because we are so attached to this realm and this reality. And so personally, the what I love is the breath work and the energy meditations and more shamanism and more of these practices. So funny because I've got my little tiny dog and he's here with Yana and he's besotted with her, completely in love with her. It's so hard. It's so cute. These little lovers lying on the ground cuddling. But the idea is that we are letting go of the concepts. We are loosening the concepts, and especially in the last few years, and that's fantastic. And so personally, it's these are the like laying down an understanding like this is really going to help us to shift to higher levels of consciousness. Okay, so those are those. Back into these a little bit. So we come back to Reiki and quantum healing. We're going to talk a little bit about quantum healing in our next session as well, about what that means. Sound healing and frequency work and light language. So these are all ways that we can raise our frequency and move beyond the concept of the tangible realm. So that because, like I said, every single person you meet is an infinite soul. However, there are different levels of awareness of that. So, imagine that, like, depending on the raising of the frequency, and the way you see, like how your frequency is, that we start to see levels of transparency. So imagine that you're going to see more transparency, like literally physical transparency. And some people are more dense and some people are more, the light starts to shine through more. And that's what all these practices are about. It's about expanding the light. All right, so okay. So again, when we talk about light language, and the reason that I bring this in again is because of the concept of what we talked about last week, is the concept of light. We are light, and we're speaking from light, and we're expressing from light. And that is part of the Akashic records, understanding that you can draw on the infinite field of information. And if we express and understand and open our awareness from that concept, we can use this vessel, we can use this avatar. But we aren't this avatar. It's not the other way around. It's not this avatar that is like just tapping in through meditation. When we really become more light, we are like that all the time. We start to live as light. It all sounds a bit far-fetched and airy-fairy, but it's a reality. Okay, so the whole point of all of this is just, again, it's just moving into the personal growth, the ongoing exploration, the more of a holistic understanding about what Akashic records is, what light language is, what galactic codes are, what personal expansion is, and that's the journey we're on. It's like that's the point of it all. It's like expansion, growth as a human. All right, so we are going to do a little experience to see what. Can you hear them at all? Hey.
No, can't even.
So they're so cute, so in love. So we are going to do a little experience, okay? So you can lie down for this if you like. And I know that like last week we hopefully you had a go at doing some light language, and maybe even got had a bit of an experience of it. It takes a little bit of time to feel comfortable. And the reason why sometimes it's uncomfortable more, it's because it's the human trying to do it, right? And what we really want to do is we allow ourselves to be a vessel for the light to express through you. So when you get out of the way, this has got nothing to do with you as a human. This is the vessel, the infinite soul self expressing as light. Okay, so we'll just have a bit of an experience of what that might feel like. So we'll just begin by settling in a little bit here. Closing your eyes and just letting, for just the first few moments or so, letting all that information, let it inform you. Let that information be received on a deep cellular level. Let that information recode your knowledge, your knowing, your gnosis. Allow your soul self to integrate that information to inform you. So for the next few moments, just let all that coding be received. Just getting out of the way, not overthinking it, just allow it to be integrated into your being. And then feel your physical body expanding and become aware of the Dharana, which is your pelvic area. Just feel into this space for a moment. And move the focus to the Hridayakash, the heart space, and feel and expand into this space. And then move into the Chittakash, or the mind space. Become aware of the inside of your head and expand beyond the space. And now feel into the Mahakash. So all around your body, just begin to feel the expansive space all around your body. Allow that to expand more, so that you feel like that space is expanding and filling the whole room you're in. Moving beyond the room that you're in, beyond the building. Expand more outwards, expand. And begin to breathe in a cyclic pattern, breathing in and out and back in and out. Keep breathing. Feel as though your breath is expanding and demolecularizing the physical form. See your breath as light radiating into every cell of your body. With every breath, the light expands and radiates more and more, filling the whole room and beyond, expanding beyond the building, light radiating. moving beyond the Earth's atmosphere. Breathe, expand into cosmic proportions, more. Dissolve into this field. Expand your light body. Light radiating more and more. Now allow your breath to deepen and start to experience this light radiating through. You might turn your palms up and feel light within your hands. Light radiating. Feel the light radiating through your hands, your heart, and allow that light to express through you. Maybe it's through sound, maybe it's through movement, maybe it's through mudra. Allow the light to express through you. Suru 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 kaya tira tora kasa sa 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 saya sakuna sira kamatira tu ayataya la kura sira kala tu saya kata suya taya sa sira kaya sura kaya tira kaya. Receiving information from the light, from the codes of light. Receive and experience and express. Parasiko marataya rasukuro suto maratita suya ya saya kana matira kahaya satuyata satuyata sakira mataya sura kitanaya sa kutai sa Tasi tu zaya naira kaya kasa kata kata sinaraku teka sakataya garatura sigaramatira kataza tabarati ora tu Receive, open your field and connect beyond yourself. Use your breath, connect beyond yourself, beyond your limited self. You are so much more. Expand, experience, connect to the infinite field of all potential. Expand and expand and expand. Be open, just hold it lightly. Everything that comes, every thought, every image, every experience. Receive,
Lascia
receive,
che l'aria entri ed esca fluidamente
Taketoro,
dai
hoya,
tuoi
hoya,
polmoni.
hoya, 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 sita kanavatia, tu.
Inspira luce
Aikya,
ed espira pace.
irakutu.
Osserva la luce che in te osserva il divino che è in te. Ricorda chi sei. Non dimenticarlo mai. Osservati con gratitudine. Sei parte del tutto. Sei parte del divino.
Now remain in this presence, in this connection, in this light body. Receive. As you stay there, just know that you have access to infinite knowledge that is relevant for you. It's not about necessarily connecting to the whole knowledge that ever was. What is that going to serve us? It's going to be too overwhelming in one lifetime. However, the knowledge, you have everything you need. Just like we would go online and look something up because we want to know about it. We've got our World Wide Web, the World Wide Web of infinite potential. It's all available to you. It's all right there. The Akashic Records is Google, is your own personal infinite ChatGPT. Just receive and connect, and those technologies have taught us how to receive data. We've learnt it externally, how to receive data, and now it's just a matter of being open to receive that data anyway. What is it that makes you want to look something up? There was something that gave you the nudge to go and look something up. So now just follow those nudges internally. So in the next coming days, and even tonight, if you can do a bit of journaling on these downloads, on what you received and what landed for you, and what information has been informed into you, that you can really solidify it through journaling. And in the coming days, see if you can use this as a meditation. So when you do your meditation, when you do your presencing, just come into those akasha, come into the spaces, the mahakash, your own space, and then expand and expand, and then allow your light body to radiate, and then connect to the field, and then allow and receive through the sounds of light language, through gestures, through whatever form it might come to you. Allow yourself to be open to receive and have access to this field. It's just a matter of reprogramming and getting beyond the physical condition, the human condition. So rather than add more words to this, I'm going to leave you with this right here. Allow you to integrate this, and I will connect with you guys online, and I will see you at the next session.